Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Inner Conquest, the world's greatest modern metaphysics channel. I'm your host, Jacob Edens, and today we are going to be discussing some very cool aspects of our reality that, if understood, will make you feel fantastic. Okay? So when we look at life, right, a lot of what happens when we come into this place is we get confused in that we think that this place is all there is, right? So you have this narrative that's put upon you that you're born into this body, and once your body dies, nobody knows what happens. It's all over, and you're done, and blah, 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 blah. Okay? So what happens is that creates essentially the root of all fear, right? Which is a antithesis to your natural state of pure existence, which is that you couldn't exist in some capacity. Right? The only thing is that you exist all the time. You're never not going to exist. Okay? So all fear comes from you essentially going to sleep and then having something that you believe in that's not true and you accepting it as true that creates a distortion of reality. Okay? So it's like with transgender shit, right? If you tell a boy he's a girl and he doesn't know, then it's going to fuck his whole life up, okay? So if you have core truth, but then you put in fallacy due to that soul being asleep, that soul will create that reality, but it will be a distorted reality. Understand? So that's essentially what fear is, right? Fear is like you're drunk at a party and susceptible, and somebody keeps telling you that you have a different name, and then you're drunk and you start identifying as the name, and then you wake up and you become sober and you're like, oh wait, I was fucked up, I was pretending, you know what I mean, right? So all fear comes from that type of situation. Like somebody's drunk at a party and you tell them, oh dude, you have cancer, you know what I mean? Because they're so fucked up, they're like, oh my God, I have cancer, they start freaking out, right? It's not true, but you believe it in that susceptible state. So everything that's fear-based in your life is essentially you being in that dumbed down susceptible state and then believing knowledge that isn't truth, right? Because the only truth that really matters is that you're your own authority entirely. Nothing outside of you has dominion. That's why in scripture, your whole process is to become what is called the Lord of Scripture, which means you rule your inner domain as the Lord of your domain, because even if you give yourself a temporary experience of being a slave or a servant, you're still the Lord of your domain, and that's recognized by reality at the greater level because reality reflects you and shows you you. So in essence, you are reality itself, right? You're an individualized soul who has an identity that they can make malleable and turn themselves into whatever they want, and reality is at your beck and call. And it's at your beck and call so much that if you want the experience of complete disconnection, loneliness, fear, etc., it will edify and create a physically manifested reality around your assumptions, right? So your assumptions, your beliefs, your thoughts, what you consent to and accept to be true, create your own personal, localized sphere of reality, right? So this place, without people in it to create the reality, would just be a blank slate. But we all come in here and we fill it with our thought forms, etc., and create our own personal life in the greater context of the co-creation. So what you're doing when you're going through essentially a process of waking up is understanding the correlation between your inner state and your outer world, okay? Your outer world is a slowed down reverberation of who you are as an individual, right? So what happens is essentially when you're in that groggy state, you have your external reality showcasing you valuable data and information about who you're being, who you are, how your relationships are, how your relationship with money is, etc., right? And what happens is if you're asleep and you don't understand that correlation, then you take that external reality at face value, and then you'll recreate it over and over again because you accept that as a final causative point, right? So like if your parents had an issue with something and then you grow up and you're like, I'm somebody who always has this issue, right? The only thing keeping that alive is you identifying as somebody who has that issue now, because everything's now. So everything has to be recreated and sustained through your constant attention and edification of it, right? The second you choose different, that entire reality construct in your specific localized reality begins to dissipate. But what happens is because people are unsure of themselves and because this reality has a latent feedback mechanism built into it, they don't see the immediate byproduct of their shifts in their internal states. So that's where the whole concept of faith and persistence comes into play. It's exclusive to this reality, right? So like if you're in a lucid dream and you're like, I want to be in my dream body, I want to have $1 billion, it'll just present itself to you, right? Because you have that recognition of power, authority, and control in that state, even if you are groggy and not necessarily coming into that full awakening, right? But what happens is in this place, you still have that same power. There's just a latent reverberative feedback mechanism. So it ensures that you stay focused and persistent on your ideals, okay? So what you consent and accept to be true about yourself and others will be reflected to you in the reality, right? So when you choose different, essentially what you are doing is you are overcoming the solidification of the externalization of your previous state of being or state of consciousness and or state of awareness, right? So if I'm aware of a dynamic in my life, oh, I go to work, I do this, this, and this, and this. And then I'm like, no, I'm actually an entrepreneur who's financially free. My entire awareness has to shift into that new identity because that new identity is aware of different circumstances, people, places, and events, and ultimately has a different vibrational feeling state frequency, right, that has to be lived in if it is to be sustained. So when you have a previous reality that's fixed, right, and solidified, it's because it's been normalized and sustained long enough for the reality to solidify in the same way that ice freezes when it's put out into, or water freezes when it's put out into the cold, right? So what you want to do is think from a normalization, standardization standpoint of your ideal life and scenario and the identity who's experiencing that now, right? And that requires a shift of focus in which you change yourself internally to meet that ideal and or that criteria, but you're also dealing with the dualistic nature of the reality external to you, not reflecting and showing that to you immediately. So what that does is it forces you to become greater than your surroundings. Essentially, you have to exercise your influence, your authority, and your total power over your circumstances. Nothing can have power over you external to you unless you give it power. That's why you could say you can have nothing that you don't already have, right? If you think that this thing is a challenge, then that thing is a challenge and has to present and or reflect itself as a challenge to you. So when people talk about surrender is a stupid word because it implies that you lost. We come from a Western dialect, and surrender is essentially giving up, right? So when you give up, what you're doing is you're just releasing the perception that this thing has power over you, right? You're releasing your judgment of this thing being more powerful than you. You say, no, this actually doesn't have power over me. I'm more powerful than it, and now it must secede from my reality, right? That's what you're doing when people talk about surrender. But surrender is dumb. You want to be a conqueror, and in scripture, you are more than a conqueror. You are reality manifest, right? So the way you get a hold of that is you understand that you are your own authority, right? So when you are your own authority, in the same way, when you go into Mario Kart, right? It's like if somebody's like, oh, your Mario Kart is slow or stupid or whatever, like that's your character. It has no reflection on you as an individual. They're talking about your character in the game. So any circumstance that involves you in this reality is your character in the game going through a circumstance. But you are untouched and you are beyond the game. You're bigger than the game, right? What's worth more, a human life or a Call of Duty CD, right? You play Call of Duty at your behest, at your leisure, because you decide that it would be a fun way to spend your time. And that's how you play the game of life. Now, the game of life does have certain parameters that make it, in some perspectives, what you could consider to be much more challenging than other games. But even that is just a perception, and you are the beholder of all perceptions. You get to choose your perception at any point in time. And guess what? Because you're you, the reality has to reflect that back to you. But if you give up immediately in this reality, then it's easy to fall back into the latent vibration of your previous self, because the external world and internal world to some extent in the realm of thought, emotion, and identity will hold that frame of what you've consistently agreed to and had be true. But once you understand that mechanism as well, that can be exploited to your benefit, because if you didn't have a subconscious running autonomic programs all the time, then you'd have to consciously hold in frame everything that you wanted to be continuously sustained through your conscious effort, which is stupid. So you want to have, if your identity is solidified into being extremely healthy, you want your subconscious to loop that program of being healthy all the time. If you are somebody who's making money every day, you want your subconscious to loop the shit out of that program every single day, right? You want these things that are favorable to you to be looped and rewired and consistently energized by a subconscious, which is still conscious, which means it's subservient to consciousness. But in the same way, you have a conscious mind, you're not thinking about breathing, right? But you breathe perfect all the time or else you would die. So there's a system within you that can auto-regulate these things. So you're basically using your conscious mind to build systems and protocols within your reality that loop and regulate favorable experiences to you that are on the wanted and or fulfillment side of things. So the way that you do that initially is you start in your mental space with I have this. That's your core thought, right? Because anything else implies that you're not who you want to be and you don't have what you want to have, which is an experience into itself that is your birthright to have that experience if you want to. But, I get the gist that most people are like, this is stupid, this should be sorted, so let's just sort it out and do what we want to do, right? So I have this, and then anything external to you or internal in terms of thoughts, emotions, beliefs, intrusive thoughts, etc., that's not in alignment with your ideal, you disidentify with it and call power back from it. You just go, no, this has no power over me, it has no authority over me, I have my own authority in my own entire life, right? And as you come into that authority, which is really who you are, you really have authority. This place is designed to give you an experience of being who you are not. So if you understand just the basic parameters of the situation that you're in, you can dominate it really easily. And then the only thing that you really have to work on is your discipline and your persistence. But you don't even really need to take action. You just need to change your identity. This thing happens. No, I am this person who has this. No, I am this person who has this. No, I am this person who has this. No, it's actually like this. No, it's actually like this, right? Until that becomes your dominant thought structure and your default setting, and your subconscious really accepts that as true. And then it does all the heavy lifting for you. So you're really just anything that's technically hard, you just call your authority and say, no, this isn't me anymore, because it's sustained by you. That subconscious is still a part of you. It's still your conscious mind. You've just bifurcated it so that you don't have to micromanage everything all the time, right? Pretty smart thing to do. So you have these things working for you, and all that you really have to do is just don't be groggy anymore from drinking alcohol all the time, which I'm not even talking about literal alcohol. I'm talking about when you come into this place, you're given the biggest dose of amnesia you could ever think about. Putting a god to sleep, what you would need in terms of amniotic. I don't know how to say that word like that, but amnesia type gas or whatever. You need a fucking shit ton, dude. You need a ridiculous amount of things to make you forget that you are the ultimate authority in your life. It's ridiculous. So just understand that you got knocked out with the laughing gas. Okay, you're still you still have all your powers, nothing can hurt you, nothing can touch you. You're in a reality construct that is very malleable. It's very capable to realize any hopes and dreams that you have. It's always responding to you. It's always at your beck and call. But what happens when you wake up is like, you puked on your shirt a little bit when you were too wasted. So it's like, yeah, I got to change my shirt, but it's like, you're still you're still fine, right? It may not be the most pleasant experience to make amends for or to correct, but there's nothing inherently flawed with you. You still have all the authority, power, and will at your command, and it's literally through you just claiming that, right? It's not something that you have to earn or go through challenges or trials to achieve. You are that thing, so you can claim the amount of it that you would like to have now, knowing that this external reality has a little bit of a slowed latent reverberation behind it, but who gives a fuck, because you're more powerful than that whole entire system because you exist outside of it and you existed before it was created. So I know you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave comments of future videos that you would like made. Additionally, the link tree has all my coaching. If you'd like to do any one-on-ones, you want to do one of my protocols, you're more than welcome to check that out. If you have any questions, email me. But more important than any of that, go conquer, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.